Welcome to Justice Matters. I'm Denise George, Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Justice Matters is a program aimed to inform, engage, and empower you with knowledge of Virgin Islands laws that affect our everyday lives and our entire community. That's just so you can make a difference in our community and be a part of the solution. Today's topic is breaking the cycle of family violence. Under Virgin Islands law, domestic violence crimes are violent crimes committed against victims in family or intimate relationships with the offender. Specifically, a spouse, former spouse, parent, child, or any other family or member related by blood or marriage, a household member, a person with whom the victim has a child in common. It is said that families are the building blocks of a strong community, and strong communities build strong nations. That's why domestic violence or family violence is a threat to the very foundation of our community. That's why crime prevention efforts in our justice system become so important, because we cannot cure the violence that besets our community without addressing head-on violence in our homes, among our families. At the AG's office, we prosecute in court hundreds of domestic violence cases every year after arrests are made. While our courts punish domestic violence crime offenders with jail, fines, or protective orders for the protection of the victims and the safety of the community, the courts often seek ways to break the cycle of domestic violence by ordering some violent offenders into counseling treatment programs to hopefully rehabilitate them and help prevent the reoccurrence of domestic violence in relationships and families. Our guest today is Bonnie Roy, a social worker, a master social worker with the Family Resource Center on St. Thomas, and who is involved in the treatment and counseling programs of male and female domestic violence offenders. And she's here to talk about the aim to break the cycle of family violence. Welcome to Justice Matters, Ms. Roy.
Thank you, Ms. George. Thank you.
And I heard about the great work that you do with the Family Resource Center here in St. Thomas regarding domestic violence and addressing that and prevention and counseling issues. But tell me, what is it about tell us a bit about the men terminating violence and the men for nonviolence. What is that?
Well, actually, it's a program. We have a program for men who come to us who have experienced domestic violence or other violent things, and we provide a 6-month program for them to address their violence and to move forward.
How does it come about that you get the clients to come in?
They're primarily from the court. Once in a blue moon, we get somebody who would like to learn more about himself and his violence, who is having trouble in his relationship with his spouse or significant other, and would like to learn more about himself. Once in a while, I have had referrals from employers in the community who would like to have the employee address his anger issues. So that's primarily the court audit.
How did it come about that this program
program
specifically tailored to men and to males?
Family Resource Center is very dear to me. Their mission is beautiful, and in fact, I volunteered for a couple of years at Family Resource Center to work with victims, to work with people who are experiencing grief and loss. And I really enjoyed that. And so I took a job with them after the 2-year period as a part-time counselor, therapist. And I was asked by the coordinator of the Men Terminating Violence program if I would be a facilitator. So, so I said I would, and I took the training with her, Neville and I. Neville is my co-facilitator. The two of us trained together in 2007, and we've been there ever since.
When you work with that program, first of all, what's your background? What is your background?
Well, I have my master's in social work. I'm a licensed independent clinician. And I've been working in the field for many, many years in all kinds of areas. I've worked with women who have been victimized. I've worked in hospitals and cancer units. I've worked in school systems, and I've had a long career in the field. And it's something that I enjoy, and I really feel that it's a need in the community.
Well, what in those men for nonviolence programs, how is it that you actually address the core roots of what causes those violent behaviors?
Well, what causes violence? This whole field has evolved over the past 50, 60 years. And initially, historically, the cause of violence was for men, was due to power and control, issues of power and control within the relationship. And that's how the programs began to address the domestic violence issues, because prior to that time, things that happened in one's home were private, and nobody could interfere with it. It was private. So if there was domestic violence in the home, it would stay there. Okay. But it wasn't until 50 or 60 years ago when people began to talk about it, violence began to be reported more, and the courts began to recognize that they had a social problem, not a problem in the home. It was a social problem that they had to deal with. So that's when the court became involved, and programs such as the Men Terminating Violence evolved. And the Duluth model, which is the model that addresses the power and control that men have over women, was addressed. Now, has lasted for a long time, and there's still that element in domestic violence cases of power and control. However, research has continued and found that there are other causes for domestic violence as well. So actually there are two causes of domestic violence. The second cause, a multi-causal one, involves things like retaliation and domestic violence. So that's for both men and women. They retaliate, they're angry, and so they quote unquote lose their temper. Right. And then you have violence. There is some people have an inability to express themselves, to say, I'm angry with you. I don't like what you've done. I'm jealous. I saw you talking to that man. I can't. They're unable to express themselves. So they begin that violent approach, and you start getting some verbal assault, and then psychological assault, all the different ways, and then it becomes physical at times. Physical. So those that's basically what happens. And then you have people who were abused as kids, and they start acting out in their way in these relationships. So basically we have a whole smattering of causes, but there's two real paradigms here, the power and control, and then the other piece, which is the retaliation and so forth, and the jealousy.
And you mentioned, and we've interviewed Neville Williams with respect to the program, and he indicated that you also participate in those programs, those sessions with the males who were participating, and he says that they love the fact that you're there, because I was so what is it, and what perspective is it that you give when you have those programs, for you being there along with Mr. Williams?
I mean, the goal of the program really is accountability and keeping the victims safe. And and only an individual can be accountable and can decide that he wants to be accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I can't force somebody to be accountable.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, the theme of the program, the overall goal is to develop self-awareness for individuals so that they can begin to address who they are, what they want to do, what are their goals, what are things that they want to change, so that they can begin to make those changes in an environment, the group, that is going to be supportive.
Right.
So, so that is my goal. So what I do is I offer them opportunities to explore who they are, to explore how do I communicate, what kind of anger do I have? What's my style anyways? Am I explosive? Do I deny my feelings?
Right.
Am I passive aggressive? How do I express myself? We explore how males are socialized. Are they socialized to be expressive and to be interrelational, or are they stalwarts of caregiving, of going out and getting a job and keeping the family going at whatever cost, and
hunters and warriors,
and taking care of business and paying the bills and doing all the things that I was taught to do. And what kind of pressure does that put on you? What kind of stress does that put on you? Which is another big, that's one of the multi-causal stress. Stress is a big one for people. So we talk about stress management.
You mentioned also the males and females go through this. And we do know that you are involved in counseling of victims, female victims, as well as female perpetrators as well. Am I right?
Well, female perpetrators. Who were probably victims at one point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I wondered, how do you see any kind of difference between how you have to counsel the male perpetrators as opposed to the female perpetrators of domestic violence?
I've seen in both cases that they come in, both male and female perpetrators, with retaliation. They've retaliated from a situation in their relationship that where they feel disrespected, where they feel they feel as though they've been disowned. They feel isolated. I've seen that in both men and women, but women come with very, very strong defenses. Strong defenses, and feel as though they've had to protect themselves forever. They're so well defended. They're strong in that way, very strong. And going through or getting through that defense system is challenging. Because they don't know who they are. They don't know what they have. They don't know what their good qualities are. They don't know how they're going to move through the world without that defense system in place. And some of them, a lot of them come from family systems where they've been rejected. They've experienced abuse, sexually, physically, and so forth. So they've developed a coping mechanism to get through some hard times.
Now tell me then, isn't sometimes that coping mechanism, isn't that sometimes necessary to a certain point? How do you then adjust that or help them to adjust that so that it doesn't become aggressive or violent?
It's interesting because, I'll say to my women, you have been able to to build this strong coping strategy. Look what you've done. You've experienced all kinds of abuse. You've been victimized, and yet you've survived.
Mm-hmm.
You've survived, and you've survived because you've been able to build a system to keep you alive, to keep you functioning. So that is a real gift that
Mm-hmm.
some of them have, that ability to be able to survive. They've
Mm-hmm.
survived some pretty horrendous things. So if they're able to build that kind of system, just think about the system that they could build where they could realize all the gifts that they have and all the qualities that they have, and put them so that they can become self-aware, they can become understanding, they can be empathic to other people, while at the same time too taking care of themselves better, learning how to be assertive without being aggressive.
And setting boundaries.
Boundaries is an issue for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that comes with their defense.
And when you talk about assertiveness, you're talking about what?
Well, being assertive, there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive.
Yes, indeed. Right.
Yeah. When you're aggressive, you just go after it. That's what you want, you get it. So you have people who are very submissive, people who don't ask for what they want, who don't expect anything, who sit there and just
very passive.
Very passive. And then you have people who are very aggressive. They get what they want. They, at whatever cost, whatever it takes, they get what they want.
Well, how much of that would you say has to do with the socialization? Because there's definitely a different socialization of women in our society than males. And we do have female perputrators, of course, but we have more female victims, of domestic violence. And to what extent is that socialization from a little girl or a little boy, and the types of toys we play with? The little girls with the baby dolls and the Barbie dolls, and the boys with the GI Joes and the Army men. But really, doesn't that sort of socialize this, and how does that affect what it is that we are
socialization is a real big factor in these problems. In fact, that's where the Duluth model originally came from. How women and men were socialized differently. Women are socialized to be interrelational, to sit back, to be there for people, to take care of people, to make sure everybody's wants and needs are taken care of. Men are socialized to not be in touch with their feelings so much, to be providers, to provide, to be out there, to protect, to make sure that the home is working and everything in the home.
And that's a good thing.
That's
not a bad thing, right?
That's a very good thing. And I'll say to the guys, you know what? If you were going to the hospital to bring your friend who just had a baby girl, something, could you bring the baby girl a blue blanket? You'd say, oh, no, girls get pink. Boys get blue. Oh, no. And I said, well, see what I mean? I mean, that's what you've been taught.
Right.
It's taught. This kind of behavior that we have, these kind of ways of socializing have been taught. Oh my God, you'd be thrown out of the hospital if you brought a blue blanket to a girl. You see what I mean? And so it makes you really realize how much of what we do is learned. And if it's learned, you can learn something else.
And sometimes I look at that, and as I was saying, I was talking to you before the show, and I was saying that, I have conversations about, from now on, looking forward, I think that little girls, maybe we should have our little girls have, instead of just the regular baby dolls and the Barbie dolls, start having some superhero dolls and really encouraging that, or, have them exposed to seeing women in a more, stronger light, like such as, the Wakanda warriors and, that sort of thing. But because it instills a sense of, and I say assertiveness, not even aggressiveness, because it sends a sense of strength, not being afraid, being able to stand up, being able to fight if you have to. But at the same time, it's so disciplined and coordinated. That I think that we need to maybe socialize a little different than maybe we're socializing our girls, maybe from babies, to be a little bit too much on that side. Or maybe I should say not exposed to the strength, because I would never ever say too much, because it's important that we are nurturers. And I think that's probably natural for women to be more of nurturers and males not. And,
right, exactly.
Like the French say, vive la différence.
But it's interesting too. I mean, when you look at the social problems that we have and how many single parent homes there are with just women and kids, and how women have strength. They've taken care of their families. They've been the provider. They've been the ones who are there, taking care of the hurts and the pains, and then they go out and they go work. And we have got to capitalize on that so women can see that they have been doing all those things. And I think that might be part of what we're seeing when we see an increase in women perpetrators, because they're beginning to come out and express their anger like the men have, for decades. And I think it's all evolving. I think women are beginning to see that, but they don't quite know how to accept it and to make it grow. And I think that's the real piece that we need to take a look at. Maybe there should be more parenting programs for women, so that they can learn more about, what it is to be a parent. Maybe self-esteem workshops for women. I do that a lot with my women.
Why do you think that it's connected? Like I know that there was so much of a connection made with when you spoke about the males and in the male program, but with the female program, you mentioned self-esteem more than once. Why is that? What do you see in the women's program regarding self-esteem that seems more prevalent than in the male?
Well, actually, I mean, it's in both programs. Building self-esteem is a skill. It's a skill that they really both have to really take a look at. The women struggle with that more because there's, as I point out, they're so well defended that they struggle with letting that defense down. So if you can,
in some ways, you talk about letting the defense down, and then in some ways, just in our society, in some areas of communities where a woman may be, those defenses are really important. Like it's like if you let them down, you can really, be in trouble. So how do you
rebuild
how do you teach? How do you learn to change the aggressiveness into the assertiveness without compromising the strength, the inner strength that they have?
And that's part of the program too, and that's why it's some programs last about a year, and I'm beginning to think that makes more sense, because as you can't tear everything down without rebuilding and having the skills to be able to utilize at the same time. So they kind of go hand in hand. As you begin to build their self-esteem, you begin to give them the equipment they need, the tools they need to be able to express themselves in a way that they couldn't in the past. Like, for example, I'm angry with you today. I don't agree with that. I mean, to be able to express their feelings, because I say, once you're able to be emotionally intelligent about yourself, you can express your feelings. You can let people know how you feel, and they can't argue with you. That's your feeling. there's so much stigma about domestic violence, about violence in the home, about that people, especially men feel very uncomfortable coming and asking for help. And that's part of their socialization. I can't ask for help. I'm the provider. I got to take care of everything. I can't. And, I just think men need to know that, that having relationships are difficult, that, we weren't taught in school how to build a relationship. We were never really taught that.
No one was.
No, we never had a class in high school on how to build a relationship. And so, and there are problems that come up. And it's so important to be able to feel like, geez, I got to get some help. I'm going to have to go talk to somebody. This is getting ridiculous. And just come. Just come and ask for help, because you were never taught that. You were never taught parenting. I don't believe there's much of a parenting class at high school level. I mean, just all the skills to get through life, and life is challenging and life is difficult. And just all these skills that we need, we've never been taught formally. So, feel free to come and ask. You can always, I always say you can always ask.
Right.
You can always ask.
That's good.
And that's what Family Resource is there. Family Resource Center is a great little place.
Right. And we partnered, Department of Justice has partnered with our Family Resource Center as well as other organizations with respect to programs and funding programs through our Access and Visitation grants that are geared towards building families for this very reason, that building strong families is so important for the future. These islands, and then hopefully our prosecution sections of the Department of Justice wouldn't have as much work to do at all, and that's just what the result that we really want. I would just say that we just had our first graduation of a parenting program.
I was talking to Sandra about that. That's
with the
great.
Haitian community, with the Haitian church.
I think that was wonderful,
awesome, and I really hope that we can extend that. And there are plans actually to extend that further to to the community and develop a lot of these parenting programs with groups. So it's great. Thank you so much. It's great what you're doing with the Family Resource Center, with these programs with male and female perpetrators of domestic violence. In really, turning things around and building our community. It's great work that you're doing over there. So thank you so much for joining us on Justice Matters.
It was fun.
Remember the numbers for Family Resource Center on St. Thomas, 340-776-3966 for counseling services for offenders and of victims of domestic violence. Also the Women's Coalition of St. Croix, the Men's Coalition of St. Croix as well. And thank you so much for joining us again on this episode of Justice Matters.